Exploration is a crucial part of human nature and survival. Throughout history, our ancestors have time and again had to embark on dangerous journeys to explore new places in search of food and shelter. Later, as human society evolved, the motivation behind exploration was transformed. It was no longer purely about survival, but about curiosity, expansion, greed, and lust for personal glory. By the 19th century, even the most remote areas of our planet, with the most unforgiving conditions, had attracted explorers, a trend which continues to this day. In this video, we're going to talk about the exploration of perhaps the most hostile place on Earth, the Arctic Circle, and examine what this region means to the world today. Do you know why thousands of people on YouTube and Patreon support us financially? Because they get history you won't find anywhere else. We release 3 new exclusive videos every week. Plus, they get perks like early access to all videos, voting rights on upcoming series and videos, access to our private Discord, our production schedule, and much more. Right now, 250 exclusive episodes are waiting for members and patrons, including from our series on the Eastern Front of World War II, Spanish War of Succession, the Punic Wars, the Pacific War, the Iberian Reconquista, the Russian Revolution and Civil War, the North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, Sicilian Wars between the Greeks and Carthaginians, and many others. By joining, you're not only unlocking rare content, you're also supporting the stories you love. Your help allows us to keep producing 3 free videos per week while paying our team competitive salaries and growing the channel. Join via the links in the description, the pinned comment, or by pressing the join button under the video. Thanks for making this possible. The Arctic Circle is the area surrounding the North Pole, the Arctic Ocean, and parts of lands belonging to the United States, Canada, Russia, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. Evidence of human settlements and activity in the Arctic dates back well into the mists of history, with archaeological finds, such as the Yana rhinoceros horn site in Siberia, dated to some 32,000 years ago. For millennia, this region was populated by the ancestors of Siberian indigenous groups, such as the Chukchi and Nenets, who were predominantly engaged in mammoth hunting. It was these groups who crossed the Bering Strait to first settle modern-day Alaska and Arctic Canada some 20,000 years ago, where the indigenous Inuit peoples live today. Obviously, early European explorers were not aware of this, as they were not aware of what was west of the Atlantic Ocean and north of the British Isles. The first written account of a European voyage to the Arctic Circle was by a Greek geographer, Pytheas, in a now lost book. Pytheas claimed to have set sail from Massalia in modern-day Marseille in 325 BCE through the Gibraltar Straits, then circumnavigating the British Isles and reaching a land called Thule, which may be the Shetland Islands, Iceland, or the northern coast of Norway. Whether he technically crossed the Arctic Circle is unknown, and other ancient Greek and Roman scholars later disputed the historicity of this journey. Next, we go all the way to the 9th century CE, when a Norwegian Viking named Nanod was sailing to the Faroe Islands but was blown off course, accidentally discovering Iceland. A few decades later, another Norseman named Ingolfur Arnason sailed to Iceland and became its first permanent settler, founding the settlement Reykjavik. Gradually, more and more Viking ships travelled to Iceland to populate it, and in one of these voyages, a man named Gunnbjorn Ulfsson was caught in a storm aboard his ship and blown off course, where he saw the shoreline of Greenland by accident. After locating Greenland, the Norsemen started their attempts to colonize this huge, cold Arctic island as well. In 985, Eric the Red founded the first Viking village on the southwestern coast of Greenland. The Vikings then traveled further west in search of new lands to settle or plunder, resources to exploit, and people to trade with. In the 10th century, they discovered the continent of North America by landing on the coast of the now Canadian province of Newfoundland, an achievement confirmed by both archaeological excavations and Norse sagas. In the meantime, the ancestors of the Russians were doing their own explorations of the northern shore of Eurasia. As early as the 11th century, the Slavic Pomor people started traveling to the White Sea area before settling on the northern Kola Peninsula. From there, they discovered Novaya Zemlya and Spitsbergen. Later on, in the 17th century, the Russian expedition, led by Semyon Dezhnev, became the first European group to reach the opposite side of Eurasia, the Bering Strait. Some believe that Dezhnev's expedition even reached Alaska and established a Russian colony there, but this has not been proven. Of course, the biggest breakthrough in Arctic exploration came with the Age of Discovery. Europe was waking up from its centuries-long Dark Age, while the expansion of the Ottoman Empire and its control over the trade routes to Asia made westward exploration a risky but enticing prospect for many entrepreneurs. The discovery of America by the Spanish in 1492 was a huge and transformational event, but it must be remembered that Christopher Columbus only discovered the Americas by accident, while trying to find a shorter route to the Spice Islands of Asia, a route which remained yet unfound. Thus, for several centuries, European explorers continued trying to find the Northwest Passage, a fabled sea lane through the Arctic, which connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and allowed for a far shorter journey from Europe to Asia. John Cabot, Henry Hudson, Sir John Franklin, and others made several ultimately unsuccessful attempts to discover it, with many brave men perishing due to extreme conditions and difficulty of navigating through the ice-laden and treacherous Arctic waterways. All these expeditions made important contributions to Arctic exploration and the mapping of this overlooked part of the world. The Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen's expedition was the first to navigate the Northwest Passage in 1906. But this route was too risky and shallow to be used for commercial purposes permanently. Of course, not all Arctic expeditions were made for commercial or scientific purposes or in the name of human progress. At the time, when blind spots on the map were becoming extremely rare, reaching those rare spots was a matter of personal glory. For instance, Robert Peary and Frederick Cook competed to reach the North Pole first, with Cook claiming to have beaten Peary to the punch in 1908. However, Peary strongly refuted Cook's claim, and in the following year, Peary finally reached it after several failed attempts, ensuring that history now remembers him as the first person to have been to the North Pole. During the early 20th century, using the Arctic for resource extraction, commercial shipping, or for any other tangible purpose was impossible. Although many more courageous expeditions were carried out in the Arctic Circle for the sake of adventure, personal glory, and sometimes scholarly curiosity, it remained one of the least explored and exploited areas of the planet. One thing that changed this to a certain extent was war. During the Second World War, the Arctic Circle became a unique and strategically important theatre. The Arctic Ocean was used by the British and Americans to deliver vital Lend-Lease supplies to the Soviet Union, with German U-boats trying to prevent this from happening. Throughout World War II, over 100 Allied merchant vessels were sunk by Germany in the Arctic Ocean. With the beginning of the nuclear age, the importance of the Arctic increased. The shortest route between the two Cold War superpowers was over the Arctic, which caused further militarization of the region. Both sides started building Arctic air bases, capable of housing strategic bombers, which could deliver nuclear weapons to their adversaries. The United States built Thule Air Base in Greenland and Alert Station in Canada, which was part of the Distant Early Warning Line, or DEW, tasked with warning the United States military about any nuclear strikes on them before they reached American soil. The Soviets had their own military bases, hosting strategic bombers in the Kola Peninsula, Novaya Zemlya, and elsewhere throughout the Arctic Circle, including on the easternmost edge of Eurasia. Both sides extensively employed submarines in the Arctic for deterrence and to gather intelligence. American U-2 spy planes regularly carried out intelligence flights to find out what the Soviets were up to in the Arctic. After the end of the Cold War in 1991, the world entered a period of peace and cooperation in the Arctic. In 1996, the Arctic Council was established, consisting of Russia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the United States. The Arctic Council served as a platform for cooperation, protection of the environment, and of indigenous Arctic communities. Thus far, the Arctic nations have been able to solve their disputes related to land and maritime boundaries peacefully, based on the legal framework offered by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. For instance, after decades of planting flags and leaving each other whiskey and schnapps bottles, Canada and Denmark agreed to divide the disputed Hans Island in half between them in 2022. However, by the mid-2000s, the post-Cold War global order began showing cracks. Buoyed by rising energy revenues, Russia started demanding a bigger role in global affairs. Meanwhile, climate change discussion and recognition were entering the mainstream discourse. Climate change meant rising global temperatures and melting ice. The Arctic is warming approximately 4 times faster than the global average. Since the 1980s, the volume of ice in the Arctic has fallen by 70%. According to the 2018 NASA report, the Arctic has been losing approximately 55,000 square kilometers of ice every year in the past 5 decades. At this rate, the North Pole could be completely ice-free in the summer by 2050. This means that in the foreseeable future, the untapped resource potential of the Arctic can be exploited, while the ice-free Arctic Circle would offer viable commercial shipping routes. Before trying to discuss the tensions between nation-states caused by the increased significance of the Arctic, let's try to understand how many resources are in the Arctic and how feasible it is to extract them, along with why the Arctic shipping routes seem so attractive. According to the 2008 US Geological Survey study called Circum-Arctic Resource Appraisal, 13% of global untapped oil reserves and 30% of gas reserves are in the Arctic. Nevertheless, it must be borne in mind that these are just estimates based on geological data, and getting a more precise picture would only be possible once the drilling starts. However, it is also estimated that extracting oil and gas in the Arctic will be costly, even when the ice melts. Suppose Arctic extraction ends up being more expensive than cheaper oil and gas extraction in America and Qatar. In that case, it will not be economically viable to establish expensive energy extraction infrastructure in the Arctic Circle. At this point, Russia has already invested an estimated $27 billion into the Yamal LNG project, which has the capacity to produce 16.5 million metric tons of liquefied natural gas annually. The Russians claim that this project will be commercially feasible even if oil prices drop to $30 per barrel. So the Arctic nations have already started investing in energy production in the Arctic Circle, but the feasibility of further extraction will become clearer once exploration of gas and oil reserves starts on a larger scale. There are also green minerals in the Arctic, including cobalt, graphite, lithium and nickel, elements used in electric car batteries, zinc used in solar panels and wind turbines, along with titanium, tungsten and vanadium, which are rare and expensive resources. Greenland looks particularly promising in that regard. According to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, this largest island in the world has 43 of the 50 minerals considered vital by the US for its security. Particularly notable here is the Kvanefjeld project near the town of Nasak in South Greenland. This area is believed to have large deposits of uranium and rare earth elements. The project was carried out by an Australian mining company called Energy Transition Minerals, in which the Chinese company Shenghe Resources Holding Co. Limited has a 12.5% stake. Even though the project has hit a wall due to environmental considerations and a ban on uranium mining, the Chinese participation has caused concerns in the United States and the European Union. Donald Trump's recent aggressive rhetoric about Greenland can be arguably viewed and understood through the lens of the vast resources on the island, the extraction of which will be presumably possible once the ice melts in Greenland. Greenland's resources will be very important considering where technology is going right now, and the current administration wants America to have access to these resources and prevent China from doing the same. But the problem is that Trump wants to do that in an old-fashioned, blatant land grab manner in order to avoid any competition from European, Chinese or other companies. Another crucial thing that increases the interest in the Arctic Circle are the shipping routes that could be available if the ice melts. There are three main routes passing through the Arctic. The first is the aforementioned Northwest Passage, which stretches from the Beaufort Sea to Baffin Bay, connecting the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. The second is the Northern Sea Route, which connects these two oceans along the northern shore of Russia. The third and final route is the Transpolar Sea Route, which traverses the Bering Strait over the North Pole and the Atlantic Ocean. Each route is commercially promising, as they are shorter than current trade routes between Asia, North America and Europe, which means saving money on shipping, fuel and salary costs. Each of them has advantages and challenges. The northwestern route consists of narrow, winding channels with shallow waters, which may limit the size of ships operating in it. It has only one deep water port in Milne Inlet on Baffin Island. This means that a lot of investment in infrastructure would have to be made to make the northwestern route usable. Moreover, there is a political dispute regarding this route. Canada considers the route its own, while America and Europe consider the Northwestern Passage an international strait. This has the potential to be a significant impediment for the development of the northwestern route, particularly if US-Canada relations continue to deteriorate. The Transpolar Sea Route is the shortest route from the North Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, avoiding territorial waters and decreasing political risks. It runs through the central Arctic Ocean, which is much deeper and would allow for larger vessels to operate in it. The problem is that all the melting ice will fill this route with icebergs, which would require a lot of icebreaker ships to make the shipping work, resulting in an additional financial consideration to bear in mind. The Northern Sea Route is the shortest, as ships can save up to 40% in travel distance between Europe and Asia. For example, the journey from Rotterdam to Shanghai could decrease from 30 to 14 days. This route has been ice-free in the summers almost every year since 2005, plus the vast Russian reserve of icebreakers allows for shipping in other seasons too. The Northern Sea route has already seen an increase in the number of ships using it, from 19 in 2016 to 92 in 2024. The problem here is that much of the route is within Russian territorial waters. Moreover, icebreakers would have to accompany commercial vessels to negate the risk of icebergs. Both of these factors create additional costs. Since the invasion of Ukraine, relations between Europe and Russia have hit another low. Even though it is tough to predict when relations will start improving, the Russians' control over the Northern Sea route carries significant political risks. The advantages of the Arctic shipping routes are obvious, but along with the risks already mentioned here, there are several other environmental factors to consider. There is a chance that the shrinking ice will leave northern coastlines unprotected from Arctic storms. The melting will most likely cause coastal erosion, putting existing infrastructure under threat and forcing the Arctic nations to invest even more in their Arctic regions. This, along with increased storminess and an abundance of icebergs, will make the Arctic shipping routes risky. But how risky? That is the question that does not have an answer now, due to a high number of variables and uncharted waters we're about to enter in terms of the unpredictability of the environmental impact of climate change on the Arctic Circle. The advantages seemingly outweigh the risks for the Arctic nations, as they are making moves to gain more than others in this Arctic race. On August 2, 2007, a Russian expedition, headed by Artur Chilingarov, planted a Russian flag on the sea floor beneath the North Pole. Other Arctic nations, particularly Canada and Denmark, denounced this symbolic move. Canada's Foreign Minister Peter Mackay responded to this photo op by saying, "This isn't the 15th century. You can't just go around the world and plant flags and say, 'We're claiming this territory.'" All three states make claims to the underwater mountain range called the Lomonosov Ridge, which stretches for 1,800 kilometers and is said to be extremely resource-rich. Although the states have so far managed to solve their grievances through the UNCLOS or bilaterally, the crumbling of the current world order, as well as the expansionist dreams of Russia and Donald Trump's America, substantially increase the risk of confrontation in the Arctic. At this point, Russia is actively preparing to assert its dominance in the Arctic. Although its Arctic shoreline is inhospitable, about 2.4 million Russians already live in the Arctic Circle. In addition, 10% of Russia's GDP and 20% of its exports are in the Arctic Circle. Russia has major port cities like Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, as well as several other deep-water ports like Tadinka and Sabeta in the far north. In recent years, Russia has reopened more than 50 Cold War-era military bases along the Arctic shoreline. In 2019, Putin announced that the Arctic accounts for more than 10% of all investments in Russia and declared it's Russia's special sphere of influence. Although Russia has been struggling with building warships due to sanctions, they have reportedly expanded their nuclear submarine fleet. They also have by far the largest fleet of icebreakers, with 37 such vessels. To compare, the United States has only one heavy icebreaker, which is almost 50 years old. Russia's active remilitarization has put other Arctic states on alert. All of them have increased their Arctic-related spending, particularly with regard to the military. This is done as a deterrent to Russia, since all other Arctic nations are part of the Western coalition, the future of which is now frankly unclear. But they are also increasing military spending to bolster their political and legal claims on the Arctic with muscle. For instance, in 2024, the Pentagon published the updated 2024 Arctic Strategy, which emphasizes infrastructural development, enhanced presence, and technological progress tailored to Arctic conditions. In March 2024, NATO nations, including Finland, Norway, and Sweden, conducted the Nordic Response Military Drill, in which over 20,000 troops in the Arctic participated. Canada has announced investments in its Arctic military infrastructure, which included the construction of new submarines, icebreakers, and radar systems. We can go on and on about this new military buildup in the Arctic. The trend of militarization in the Arctic is clear. Of course, at this point, we are decades away from understanding the whole impact of climate change on the Arctic. We are also decades away from large-scale resource extraction and the usage of Arctic shipping routes. Therefore, it may be some time before the international community witnesses any actual confrontation in the Arctic Circle. As the Canadian Chief of Staff Walter Natinchuk put it in 2009, If someone were to invade the Canadian Arctic, my first task would be to rescue them. Obviously, the Arctic Circle is too inhospitable to host any large-scale human involvement right now. However, the Arctic nations have started making plans and moving to prepare for the future. Even non-Arctic nations like China have started making claims of their own to the Arctic. We are still at the very start of the global Arctic race, the next important page of human competition for resources and control. More videos on the history behind the current day's most relevant geopolitical topics are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.